Maybe it's better in Madison County, home of Huntsville, the biggest city in the state now. So I looked, and 32 offices listed. 23 of those feature unopposed Republicans.
The election is coming up on Tuesday. We're going to be talking to the Ironworkers General Secretary about the presidential election momentarily, so we won't spend any time on that. But there's lots of other elections going on across the country and here in Alabama. You took a look at the sample ballot, so tell us what you saw in Alabama.
Sure, yeah. So if you're like me, you're ready for this election to be over with. I know I personally am tired of all the text and the ads and the posts. And yeah, I'm just ready to know what we're dealing with. I do encourage everyone to exercise your right to vote. I try not to ever miss an election, even if I'm writing my own name in the ballot for some of these offices. I think it is important that you exercise your right to vote. Folks did fight and die for this right, and there are real limitations to what we can achieve through voting alone. But I encourage people to go to the ballot box and cast your opinion, because as long as they let us do that, we should do it, right? That's my philosophy. Understand some people feel differently, and that's okay. I'm not big into vote shaming or going after people for what they do or don't do at the ballot box. But we wanted to just help educate folks on what we're dealing with in terms of the sample ballot here locally in North Alabama. And I also think looking at this sample ballot tells us some things about Alabama's political environment as well. So I'm going to start with Limestone County because that's where I'm at. And a few things stood out. Looking at the sample ballot for Limestone County, if you include the presidential vote, there were 21 total offices with candidates. Now, some of those vary by district, right? You're not voting for both districts of the county commission or school board, for example. So your actual, number of offices you'll vote for will be slightly lower, but there are 21 ballots or 21 races on this ballot, and 17 of those feature unopposed Republican candidates. 17 unopposed GOP candidates out of 21 offices in Limestone County. So that includes various judges. That includes our congressman for the 5th Congressional District, Dale Strong, is not facing any opposition on the ballot this time around. Also notice circuit clerk, probate judge, county license commissioner, as I mentioned, school board. And so that stands out, certainly. If you include the president, the Democrats are challenging 3 of these 21 races. Of course, we know they're running for president, but they do have a candidate for Chief Justice of the Supreme Court here in Alabama. That's Greg Griffin, who is running against the Republican Sarah Stewart. And they also did challenge Limestone County Commission District Number 2. Roger Williams is a Democrat running against Republican Johnny Turner. So, that's interesting. I also want to point out that the incumbent for County Commission District 4 in Limestone County is an independent. All right, so LaDawn Townsend is an independent running against Republican Dawn Craig. So that stood out to me, the lack of candidates. Many folks know that Alabama ranks pretty low when it comes to voter engagement, voter turnout. For example, in 2022, our last statewide election, less than 40% of voters actually turned out for that. Of course, it'll be a higher turnout this time around with the presidential campaign, but there's a lot of reasons why there's low turnout, low participation, low engagement from voters. It's complex, and I think there's a lot of factors, including factors that go back, 205 years that we've been a state. But I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest that when you show up to the ballot box and you don't have candidates to vote for in what was it, 17 out of 21 offices. That's not going to excite a lot of people.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
That is not helping voter turnout, right? Because each one of these offices, if you're challenging them, each one of those campaigns brings new people into the fold, contacts new people. There's new networks of folks. So, you know, this will get Madison County, home of Huntsville, the biggest city in the state now. Maybe it's better in Madison County. So I looked, and there are actually 32 offices listed in the Madison County sample ballot. 23 of those feature unopposed Republicans. So Republicans are going to do pretty well locally and statewide in November by default. There are 4 Democrats out of these 32 offices. Of course, for president, I already mentioned the state Supreme Court. There is a Democrat running for Madison County chairman, and the incumbent for Madison County Commission District Number 6 is Violet Edwards, who is a Democrat, and she is facing a Libertarian challenger. In fact, the Libertarians have 8 candidates, including, if you look at the presidential ballot, including that. But the Libertarians are challenging Madison County chairman, probate judge, and 5 of the Madison County district commissions. So there are 8 Libertarians to 4 Democrats running in Madison County. One of the fastest growing, both Limestone and Madison are 2 of the fastest growing counties in the state. Madison County, of course, very populous, considered to be, you know, a more competitive area politically. You know, some people consider Madison County to be more of a purple county, so to speak. But there again, I'm not seeing a lot of candidates on the ballot. And I do think that tells us something about the state of politics in Alabama when Republicans are winning 23 out of 32 by default, or 17 out of 21 by default. That's concerning, I think, to people who value competition. So I do think that's harming voter turnout, the lack of candidates on the ballot. And that's to say nothing about the quality of the candidates that we do have, right? I'm not making a value judgment there. I'm just saying you can't vote for people that aren't running. Well, I guess you can. You can write in. And, you know, me personally, I do plan to do some write-in votes because, again, this is my opportunity to officially voice my opinion, so to speak. But I did want to review that with the sample ballot because, you know, there's going to be a lot of discussion after the election, blaming people, casting blame, you know, whichever side wins, whichever side loses, there will be a lot of folks casting blame on the other side or casting blame on people who didn't go vote. You know, and I would just encourage people to think about how helpful that really is. In Alabama, you know, Trump is poised to win the state by 20 plus points. I do understand the Electoral College, unlike some fellow Americans, I have to say. And because I understand the Electoral College, if Trump does in fact win this state by 20 plus points, there's no utility in being mad at like the 1,000 or so people who vote for the Green Party in Alabama, right? But inevitably you will see that kind of stuff happen, and it's, you know, not productive. So, you know, I'm ready for 2024 to be over. I personally am much more interested in 2026. Now I'm ready just to know what we're dealing with at the presidential and national level, so we can move on and just deal with it and prepare accordingly. But as an Alabamian, I'm interested in 2026 because that's when the entire state legislature, basically the entire state government will be up for election. And I'm just curious if these trends will continue. Will we see another cycle where folks don't have much to vote for on the ballot? I think we've got a real problem in this state. We've got a real problem in this state when it comes to lack of candidates running for office. And even more, when you dig deeper, candidates that are actually representing working class people, right? Ultimately, it's not enough just to find names on the ballot, though that would be a step of progress in Alabama. But it would be much better if we had regular working class people who represent working class communities, who are going to advocate for working class people, running on platforms that are explicitly for and by the working class. That is what we need to see in Alabama. And I know that many other southern states are in a similar situation. State Democratic parties are not in a very good shape in many places. Local county parties also, often atrophied, not very effective. In the South, we don't have a lot of third parties and independent type organizations that can do other political work. So we're just facing a real deficit there. And to me, it's a reminder of how much work is left to be done in this state. So yeah, I wanted to point that out, wanted to go over that sample ballot. There is more on the ballot than just the president, just Kamala versus Trump. But you may be disappointed at some of the lack of competition you'll see when you show up. But regardless, I do encourage you to vote, encourage you to talk to your friends and your neighbors and your coworkers, your fellow union siblings, get them to exercise their right to vote, because policies do matter and budgets matter, and those politicians will affect us one way or the other. There are, real differences. Without getting into that, I'm sure there's going to be conversations later in the show, but there are differences between different politicians and the policies and budgets that they support and how that impacts everyday people. There's also a lot of commonalities, unfortunately, in my view, areas where some of the politicians align, and it's not often in our interest. But that's what I have to say about the election and the sample ballot. If you have a more competitive race locally, whether it's in Alabama or just in the South, if you're in an area where things are a little more competitive, let us know. That'd be interesting to hear about. It's often disappointing here in our state.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.